What is going on? Thank you for tuning in, and I hope you're doing well. Now, most of the vintage action figure lines that I collect that you see behind me were really popular in the 80s or 90s, or if not, have a cult following among collectors today. The action figure line we're talking about today has neither of those. The action figure line we're talking about today fits squarely in the category of didn't know it existed, but now I need it. Of course, I'm talking about the 1991 action figure line, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure!
I'm Bill S. Preston Esquire, and I'm Ted Theodore Logan in concert!
And I make them play.
Speaker connects to figures and most cassette players to make figures play music.
Now on drums, that bodacious barbarian Genghis Khan! Yeah, our new pal from old China. Excellent! Let's rock and roll!
Squeezing their legs gets them jamming.
Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure!
Party on, dudes!
Now, as I've mentioned before, talking about VHS and video store memories, growing up I loved Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure and Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey. I used to rent them from the video store. They were favourites in our house, but I never knew about the animated series from 1990, and I never knew about the 1991 action figure line. Now, obviously the early 90s was a golden age for action figures, where just about every movie got an action figure line or was eligible for an action figure line. We had figures for Coneheads, we had figures for Congo, and Kenner obviously got right aboard with that trend because Kenner released lines like Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, they had Waterworld figures, and many, many more. And obviously Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure were included. But it was 1991, I was far too invested in the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles to notice much else that was going on. So it wasn't until maybe a year ago that I saw on YouTube a vintage action figure collection room tour, and I first saw some on-card Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure figures, and I saw them, immediately loved the look of the card, the look of the figures, and it was something that I wanted to keep an eye out for. And then oddly enough, just maybe 2 weeks later, I was at CollectorCon, and I found this guy. I found this Bill S. Preston figure, complete with his guitar. This is from a two-pack, obviously, with Bill in kind of a matching half tuxedo outfit. And from there I was hooked. And from there I've been keeping a real close eye out for these figures on Facebook groups, on eBay, and of course, you know, when I'm going to toy shows, which have been few and far between lately, but obviously that's another story. So then it wasn't until probably eight or 9, maybe even 10 months later, that, as I alluded to during my Christmas 2021 haul video, that I came across a lot of Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure action figures. It was an American eBay listing, but the price was pretty reasonable, even taking into account the shipping and the import costs. So I pulled the trigger, and like I said, I provided a bit of a sneak peek at one of those figures during the Christmas 2021 haul video. But now we're going to go through them one by one, so let's get stuck into the figures. Alrighty, so first up we have Keanu Reeves himself. We've got the Ted Theodore Logan figure, complete with his guitar, bright colours, just, you know, really nice figure with some fun details. Obviously it's a Kenner figure from the early 90s, so it's got the classic squeeze the legs action feature. And the action feature for all of the figures in this line are basically squeeze the legs and they'll play the musical instrument, but with an added complication of this plug in the back of all the figures, which we'll talk about in just a minute. So we've got the Ted figure complete in beautiful condition, and obviously we can't have Ted without Bill. So next up we've got Bill S. Preston Esquire on the Flying V guitar. Bill's obviously got a way cooler guitar than Ted, but that's alright. So Bill is once again complete in really nice shape with his guitar. Once again he's got the little plug on the back. Once again we squeeze the legs and Bill plays, and for whatever reason when you squeeze the legs on this figure they all look to the left. I'm not quite sure what that's all about, but that goes with the action feature. And the cool thing is all these figures came complete, or I'm lying to you, not all the figures, the Bill and Ted figures came complete with their card backs, and we've got these beautiful, you know, bright blue and pink card backs. We've got cross cells on the back, but I love the card art on these figures. The figures that I first saw from this toy line on YouTube that kind of introduced me to them, one of the things that stood out was the card art, because obviously in 1991 there was an infinite number of action figures on toy pegs competing for kids' attention. So these would have looked awesome on the peg. So really happy to have the cards to display with the figures, and obviously give me an idea of the other figures involved in the line, which we'll talk about in just a bit. Alrighty, so next up we've got the boys' time-traveling mentor Rufus. I love the colours on this Rufus figure. He's in great condition. The colours pop. Now, obviously we've got the plug in the back once again. Now, all of the action figures in the line except for Bill and Ted come with multiple accessories. Bill and Ted come with the guitars only. All of the other figures in the line come with kind of a musical, like a Wild Stallions accessory, which in the case of Rufus is the shoulder mounted keyboard. So we've got the keyboard goes over his head, and just like the boys, you squeeze the legs together and he plays the keys. But Rufus also has like a briefcase accessory, which when you pop it open, there's no decals or anything in there, but there's some sculpting details there that tell you that it's a computer. So we've got a 1991 spec laptop computer here. So that's another cool accessory to come with Rufus. And next up, we've got a really cool figure, a figure that I provided a bit of a sneak peek during the Christmas 2021 haul. Definitely my favorite item in the lot. And I'm talking about this Grim Reaper or Death figure. Absolutely love how this figure looks. Obviously, it looks nothing like the depiction of death that we saw in the Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey film, but I still find it really, really cool. You know, I love the fact that he's got his hood down, because the figure's complete with the robe, the sickle or scythe, and another accessory, but with the scythe, hood down, very menacing, you know, displays beautifully like that. But you take the scythe away, drop the hood down, and match him up with the other accessory he comes with, which is this wicked skull guitar. He's got the blue mohawk, he's got the Wild Stallions logo on the side of his head, and he just becomes a fully fledged member of the Wild Stallions. So that is absolutely awesome. And something that I didn't really notice before is underneath the robe, and I'm not going to take it off because I doubt my ability to put it back on without ripping it, is kind of some interesting outfit choices. We've got some what look like very formal trousers, all ripped to expose the skeleton legs, and we've almost got like a kind of a fancy red vest with some jewelry going on up top. So it's an interesting look. Obviously, he's got the plug in the back that we'll talk about in just a moment, but a really cool figure. Alrighty, so I mentioned the bizarre action feature that involves the plug on the back of each figure. One of the other items that I've got here is, and it's complete, is the Wild Stallions speaker and tape set. So essentially what we have is a pretty cool looking speaker. Looks like a late 80s, early 90s amp with the Wild Stallions logo and some other details in it. So that's really awesome. It's got 3 cables that come off it, and then we've also got a pretty rad looking cassette tape with Wild Stallions imagery and logos all over it, with 3 songs on each side of the tape. And thankfully, to help me decipher what's going on here, this item also came complete with the card back. So basically, what it explains here, and it is rather confusing. The Wild Stallion speaker and tape set work with your cassette player to let Bill and Ted or any of the other figures really play music. Insert the large plug into a cassette player, the small plugs into 2 figures, and squeeze the figures' legs together. Look at the tape to see which instruments are featured in each song. Turn the tape on. If a figure plays the wrong instrument, try the other plug to hear the other track of the stereo tape. The large plug fits most cassette players, but if you need an adapter, it can be purchased at most electronic stores. So essentially, this all sounds very confusing for a kid in 1991, but the large plug here plugs into a cassette player that's not included. The small plugs plug into 2 figures, but you have to look at the song that's playing, work out what instruments are in that song to then plug these plugs into the right figures that have those instruments. I mean, what if you didn't have all the figures? I mean, as a kid, you know, Christmas and birthday were twice a year. I mean, it's not like in a toy line that lasts for 1 year, you're going to gather up all these figures to have all the different instruments and then figure out how to play it. I'm getting heated. It's obviously really complex for a kid, you know, to try and can you imagine the parents getting pestered to try and figure this all out? And look, batteries not included is one thing. Action figures sold separately is another thing, but to not include a cassette player and the adapter doesn't work for all cassette players, that's just way too complex. I love these figures. I'm stoked to have them and display them, but in 1991, that's all sorts of weird. But how sick would it have been if they released like a Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure themed Walkman cassette player that was an awesome standalone piece of merchandise, but worked with these figures? That would have been pretty cool, because not including a cassette player is a bit different to not including batteries. Anyway, that's enough of my rant. And one thing that's kind of cool here, reading the card back on the Bill and Ted's figures, it looks as if the speaker and tape set was actually a mail away. It says here, with the Wild Stallion speaker and tape set and most cassette players, Bill and Ted's action figures can really play music. To get your speaker and tape set, send your name and address on a 3x5 inch card with a check or money order for $5.99 to Bill and Ted's Offer PO Box. And within 4 to 6 weeks after processing, you'll get your speaker and tape set. And then you just got to figure out how to use the thing. So that's pretty cool. It's obviously weird as hell, but it's pretty cool to have it in the collection. I'm pretty happy about that. Now, obviously, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure was a one-hit wonder toy line. There was no Series 2, so that means that there's only a few figures that I need to complete the line. Now, as I've done with these, I probably will have to keep an eye out for overseas eBay listings, most likely American eBay listings, to find these items. Who knows, maybe I'll get lucky. But the only 3 other mainline figures I need are 3 historical figures, which are obviously a big part of the Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure film. We've got Abraham Lincoln with a removable hat and a pretty cool looking keyboard. We've got Billy the Kid with a guitar and a lasso accessory. And then we've got Genghis Khan with a drum set and a pretty awesome club weapon accessory that splits apart to make 2 drumsticks. So that's kind of awesome. Then the only other things that we need are the Ted figure that came with this Bill figure in the 2-pack. So I want to try and find that one as well. And then last but certainly not least, something that I'm definitely going to be keeping an eye out for and probably having to buy once again overseas, is the phone booth playset. So we've got the iconic phone booth time machine from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, and it's got a pretty cool action feature where the receiver on the phone has a retractable cord that comes out. You wrap it around the historical figures, push a button, and just like the Ecto 1 Ghost Claw feature, also from Kenner, the phone receiver pulls the figure into the phone booth. So that's pretty damn cool. Now, like I mentioned, the Bill and Ted action figure line was one and done, so there was no second wave. But I have seen some interesting pictures of some of the items that Kenner had in store for the second wave if it did go ahead. I've seen some pictures of a Napoleon figure, a kind of crazy looking boom truck vehicle with a built-in stage, and a really weird looking historical playset, like a modular playset with different areas and play features dedicated to the different historical periods in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. So there's like a Wild West area with some gallows, like a medieval castle facade, and even the garage where the Wild Stallions play. So I had all sorts of fun going on with it. But alas, unfortunately for the kids of 1992, it wasn't meant to be, and none of those items made it to store shelves. But honestly, there's no wonder. Like, I don't mean to be negative about the toy line. As a collector, I love the look of them. I'm really happy to have them in the collection. I've been tracking them down. But thinking about myself as a kid in 1991 or 1992, I'm 7 or 8 years old playing with these figures, I just wouldn't have played with them at all. I would have got bored with them quickly. Let me just say that. Because thinking about my action figure play as a kid, 8, 9, 10 years old, it was always about good guys and bad guys. Regardless of whether I was playing with wrestlers or Ninja Turtles or Lego or Army Men or whatever it might be, if there were figures involved, it was about some sort of conflict. It was about good guys triumphing over bad guys. And with this, you just don't have that. I wouldn't have set them all up as a band with the speaker and tape and made them play music. I mean, if I could have figured that out, that probably would have got boring after about 5 minutes. And beyond that, there's not too much to do with them. I would have definitely displayed them. Like, as a kid, when I wasn't playing with my Ninja Turtles or my Hasbro WWF figures, they were displayed. You know what I mean? I had them set up, so I would have done that. And like I mentioned previously, when I spoke about this figure in the Christmas haul, this figure would have definitely seen some play. This figure would have made an awesome villain for the real Ghostbusters to do battle with. And in the case of me, I would have given this guy a run as like a supernatural heel in my Fig Federation with the WWF Hasbro. So this guy would have got some play. As for the other guys, not so much. They're historical figures like Billy the Kid and Genghis Khan. They're kind of cool to have iconic historical figures like that in action figure form, even if they are wacky Wild Stallion band members version of those figures. But again, that's looking at me from the perspective as an adult collector more than a kid. I don't know if a kid would have gotten much out of, you know, a Billy the Kid figure outside of the context of the Bill and Ted's movie. So anyway, it's a little bit different to other action figures that I pick up, other action figures that I collect, because whenever I get a figure or a vehicle or a playset or whatever it might be, I often think to myself, how awesome would it have been to have had this in 1989 or 1992? That's really not the case with this. I'm happy to have them as an adult in my collection. I'm looking forward to getting the other ones and getting them out on display with that phone booth. Once I track that down, I think they're going to display beautifully. But you know, I definitely wouldn't have wanted these as a kid. Now, before I wrap up, there's one mystery about the toy line that's kind of got me stumped, and maybe you can shed some light if you're watching this. And that is, which entry into the Bill and Ted's franchise are these figures based on? The first film, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, the second film, Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey, or the animated series? Because Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure came out in 1989. The animated series Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventures came out in 1990, and then you got Bogus Journey coming out in 1991. Obviously the figure line's named after the first film. The figures kind of look like, the way they're sculpted, the paint kind of looks similar to the animated series, but the Grim Reaper is only in Bogus Journey. He's not in Excellent Adventure or Excellent Adventures. So I'm kind of stumped as to whether they conceptualized the figures straight after the first film. While the animated series was in the works, the figures were in the works, and they kind of made the look consistent, because for all we know, just like every other cartoon series in the 80s and 90s, maybe the cartoon was just there to sell the figures. But then we've got the presence of the Grim Reaper, who wasn't in the first film or the animated series, just in Bogus Journey, so maybe they've kind of shoehorned him in, but then again, he looks nothing like he did in Bogus Journey. Anyway, if you happen to know, let me know. I think it's probably a mix of all, but look, regardless of what it's based on, I love these figures. They're all kinds of weird, but they're my kind of weird, so I'm really happy to have them in the collection. But I'll leave it there. I've rambled on enough, but I hope you guys enjoyed my ramblings about this action figure line. I've got a couple more videos in the works. This weekend, I'm catching up with the guys, Matt and Andrew from Keep On Collecting. We're going to go hit up Alfie's Vintage Toys here in Sydney. If you're in Sydney, make sure you go check out Alfie's Vintage Toys. So we'll probably do a video around that, and then I'm just waiting for a couple of arrivals in the mail before I do a new vintage Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles action figure pickup video, so that's coming as well. But until then, thanks so much for watching. Hope to hear from you in the comments, and I'm going to leave you with some wise words from very wise men. Cheers.
Be excellent to each other. Party on, dudes!